bullet point number 1 is the Proclaimer's book says very specifically, Brother Rutherford had a severe case of pneumonia after his release from unjust imprisonment in 1919. So if I say that phrase, what do you understand by that? What is the Proclaimer's book saying or claiming?
That he got pneumonia due to prison.
Okay.
And weren't there Watchtowers that made that claim also?
They were later on, but this is a first-hand account written at the time. So in the May 27th, 1919 St. Paul Enterprise, it says that Rutherford was on the convention program. However, it says Brother Rutherford has been quite sick with pneumonia, but is rapidly recovering and will be present. He was very, very sick, exactly as Proclaimer's book says, but there's something not right here. This is May 27th. When was Rutherford and his friends released from prison?
Well, weren't they released in March for this? So March, April, May, that's 2 months.
Over 2 months, yeah.
So he had pneumonia for 2 months?
I don't think he got pneumonia when he was in prison. We won't deal with the unjust imprisonment part here, because that's another discussion for a future time. The statement is specifically about Rutherford's sickness. So that's what we're going to take a look at and see what documented evidence we have about that period of time. The March 27th, 1919 National Labor Tribune has a letter that J.F. Rutherford wrote from the Long Island jail before he was sent to the Atlanta penitentiary. It also has an interesting letter that was written by the wife of George Fisher, the man who dared disfellowship Rutherford, about their prison experience during the Christmas of 1918. And it talks about all the Christmas gifts that they received. More than 150 prisoners in the castle had nothing for Christmas. Our brethren got a list of them from the officers, and out of their own abundance, made up a little Christmas package for each of the unfortunates. And by this many were made happy. Even the officers were so pleased that they were heard to say, "Never was anything like that done at this place before." And so we can truly say that the Lord was in the prison that Christmas. I knew each of you would be glad to know these things because each of you had a part in them. But it says something very specific that helps illustrate the point about whether or not Rutherford was sick while in prison. In the second paragraph of the letter, she says, "Many of their presents were packages of good, substantial, and wholesome food. Since receiving it, they have much improved physically. The oranges and grapefruit have been specially beneficial and probably have saved them from much sickness and suffering. The other foods have built them up physically, and each one is feeling much better. They're very grateful to the Lord for these temporal blessings and are very desirous of expressing their thankfulness and gratitude to the dear ones sending the gifts." Now remember, this is during the 1918 influenza outbreak. We've done a couple discussions also about the Watchtower celebrations of birthdays and Christmas in 1918 and 19. And so if you haven't seen those, please go take a look. You'll find some of the historical information there quite interesting. I find it interesting and a little ironic that the organization that dumped Christmas later is saved by the Christmas gifts, and it's also what kept them healthy while they were in prison. Very interesting. We have a couple telegrams from the National Labor Tribune that seems to suggest that they were in good health when they left prison. And we know from the Watchtower that they had a dinner for them, and there's no mention of Rutherford being sick until we get to this issue of the Enterprise at the end of it.
Even though the Proclaimers said it was at that time.
It's written very strangely. It says, Brother Rutherford had a severe case of pneumonia after his release from unjust imprisonment in 1919. Why are you even mentioning the unjust imprisonment if it has nothing to do with the pneumonia? Right? They seem like they're almost tying it together.
They're trying to tie it in.
Right. We have multiple lines of evidence including from the wife of the man who dared disfellowship Rutherford, Harriet Fisher, that illustrates that the men were relatively healthy even at Christmas time of 1918. They were healthy in March of 1919 when they were released. We don't hear anything about any sickness of Rutherford until later. So they have to bring out the point that he was put in prison and it was unjust, but they're tying in the pneumonia to it, and it really has no relation at all. So it's
Based on the time frame of about 2 months, it could have just said he was recovering from pneumonia, period, and left it at that.
right, but we know from this article he's sick a full 2 months after. Right. And these telegrams from the National Labor Tribune says, "May it have been with God's providence to keep you all in the best of health." So when they were released from prison, they were in good health.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't until the end of May that Rutherford's sick. So point number one in the article, I say there's something suspicious, or it's suspicious how it's written. His sickness has nothing to do with his imprisonment, for sure.
Based on the documentation here, that seems like a solved issue.
Yeah, it's suspiciously written. So it's point number one has an issue. Even better. So in this June 3rd, 1919 Enterprise, there's a letter about that May convention that Rutherford spoke at. Even though Rutherford was suffering from pneumonia, as the Enterprise says, the convention that he went to, he gave a lecture for over 2 hours. This is during the 1918 pandemic, and I don't think anyone was wearing masks. So if he's that sick, he's infecting everyone around him. It's a super spreader event, right? So how sick was he? Or he was pretty sick and he pushed himself too far. We do know that he ended up with the use of just one lung because of the pneumonia that he had. It did damage he did get very, very ill, and it did some damage, internal damage. They should have been doing their social distancing, I guess. In point number 2, it says Rutherford was under a doctor's treatment in San Diego, and this doctor told him to spend as much time as possible there in San Diego or in Southern California because the climate would be better for his health. Who was this doctor? And what was his connection to Rutherford and the Watchtower?